The void doesn't care. It never has. It stretches cold and indifferent across light-years of impossible distance, swallowing stars whole in the slow, patient maw of entropy. For eons, it witnessed the rise and fall of empires built on dust and ambition, the flickering sparks of civilizations snuffed out by cosmic indifference or their own hubris. Then came the Veln, not conquerors in the crude sense, but architects of order. They emerged from the galactic core, their sleek, obsidian-hulled dreadnoughts gliding like silent sharks through the nebulae, their philosophy as rigid as the crystalline structures of their homeworld, Valnara Prime. They called it the harmonious ascendance, others called it subjugation wrapped in velvet. To the Veln, chaos was the ultimate sin, unpredictability the cancer of the cosmos. And humanity? Humanity was a walking, talking, breathing anomaly, a chaotic variable spat out by a violent, unstable star system they'd catalogued as Sol 3, a death world teeming with life that fought, adapted and killed with terrifying efficiency just to survive another dawn. The Veln observed. They analyzed. They deemed humanity unstable, a potential vector for galactic disorder, a problem requiring resolution. Captain Aris Thorne stood on the command dais of the UNS Resolute, his knuckles white on the cool metal railing. Below, the bridge hummed with the subdued tension of a crew holding its breath. On the main holodisplay, the image was stark, brutal. Earth, or what remained of it. Continents were scarred by continent-sized craters. Oceans boiled into toxic steam. The atmosphere choked with ash that blotted out the sun. The Veln hadn't just attacked, they'd erased a surgical strike. They'd called it in their chillingly calm communique, neutralizing the primary source of chaotic potential. Neutralizing, as if humanity were a malfunctioning reactor, not billions of souls screaming into the void. Aris felt the familiar cold weight settle in his gut. Grief, yes, but beneath it, a furnace of rage banked low, waiting. He wasn't a young man anymore. Lines etched deep around his eyes spoke of decades navigating the treacherous currents of human expansion, of near misses with asteroid belts and corporate raiders. But nothing had prepared him for this. He remembered the smell of rain on dry earth, the taste of real coffee, the sound of his daughter's laugh echoing in a sun-drenched kitchen, all gone, reduced to data points in a Veln efficiency report. Status: Lieutenant. His voice was gravel, roughened by smoke and suppressed fury. Lieutenant Kalen, young, eyes wide with a terror he was desperately trying to mask, swallowed hard. Long-range sensors confirm. No survivors detected in the solar system, Captain. Atmospheric composition is incompatible with known Terran life. Radiation levels off the scale. He paused, the unspoken horror hanging heavy. They glassed it. Completely. A collective flinch ran through the bridge crew. Glassed. The word felt obscenely inadequate for the planetary holocaust displayed before them. Aris closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Not in prayer, faith had died with Earth, but in sheer, overwhelming exhaustion. Then he opened them, the furnace flaring. Plot course for the Kuiper Belt, rendezvous point Gamma. We regroup with the Dauntless and the Vigilant. And Kalen. Sir? Scrub the logs. Purge all non-essential data. We carry the memory of Earth in here. He tapped his temple. Not on servers the Veln might scavenge. He turned, his gaze sweeping over his crew, faces pale, eyes hollowed by shock but still standing. Still human. We are all that's left. Remember that. Every breath we take is defiance. Every beat of our hearts is a middle finger to the void and to the Veln. On the bridge of the harmonious edict, High Strategos Vridiak observed the sensor feed of the fleeing human vessel. The Resolute, with detached curiosity. Its trajectory was predictable, heading for the icy debris fields beyond Neptune. Efficient, logical, a final, futile gathering of the scattered remnants before inevitable assimilation or termination. Vridiak's multifaceted eyes, set deep within a chitinous obsidian black face, processed the data streams flowing across his neural interface. Biological signatures, elevated stress hormones, erratic neural patterns indicative of grief and rage, predictable emotional responses to catastrophic loss, illogical, wasteful. Confirm planetary sterilization protocol completion. Substrategos. Catharn. Brilak's voice was a low, resonant hum, devoid of inflection, transmitted directly through the ship's bioresonance field. Catharn. Smaller. His carapace. A lighter gray bowed his segmented head. Affirmative, high strategos. Sol 3 biosphere rendered inert, no complex life signatures detected. Primary chaotic node neutralized. He hesitated, a rare flicker of something akin to unease in his posture. The human vessel. They exhibit anomalous resilience. Their escape velocity was faster than projected. Their damage control protocols. Surprisingly effective against our plasma lances. Verlac's mandibles clicked softly, a sound like grinding stone. Resilience is merely a function of biological redundancy and primitive survival instinct. A death world trait. It is inefficient, wasteful of resources. It creates unpredictable variables. He gestured with a clawed limb towards the holodisplay, showing the Resolute dwindling into the distance. They flee to the Kuiper Belt, a logical, if temporary, refuge. Deploy the Silent Reapers. Let them observe. Let them learn the futility of resistance. Their eventual capture will provide valuable data on chaotic adaptation under extreme duress. Proceed with Phase 2, systematic eradication of remaining human outposts. Efficiency is harmony. Catharn bowed again, the unease deepening. He had studied the human archives before the Purge. Their art, their music, their wars, their desperate, beautiful attempts to find meaning in the chaos. It was messy, illogical, but undeniably alive in a way the sterile perfection of the ascendancy sometimes felt hollow. He pushed the thought down. Harmony demanded order. Order demanded the removal of chaos, even if it felt like extinguishing a particularly bright, if erratic, deep within the labyrinthine corridors of the Resolute. Dr. Elara Vance worked, not on weapons, not on shields, but on time. Her lab was a chaotic sanctuary of humming servers, flickering holoscreens displaying complex temporal equations, and half-eaten nutrient paste tubes. Her fingers flew over a console, her dark eyes bloodshot from days without sleep, yet burning with an intensity that bordered on feverish. She wasn't grieving Earth in the same way Aris was. Her grief was channeled, focused, weaponized into pure, desperate intellect. "Come on, you stubborn chronoton matrix," she muttered, her voice raspy. "Just bend." On the central display, a complex waveform representing localized temporal distortion flickered erratically. It was based on fragmented data salvaged from a derelict alien probe found near Proxima Centauri years ago. Technology the Veln themselves seemed to avoid, calling it temporally unsound. Humanity had barely begun to grasp its principles when the war started. Now it was their only hope. Aris found her there, leaning against the doorway, watching the frantic dance of light and data. "Progress, Doctor." Elara jumped, startled. She hadn't heard him approach. "Captain." Not progress, exactly. More like persistent failure with intermittent glimpses of possibility. She ran a hand through her tangled hair. "The theory holds. We can manipulate localized time fields, slow it down, speed it up, maybe even create microloops. But the energy requirements, the stability, it's like trying to hold smoke with your bare hands. One wrong fluctuation, and you unravel causality itself, or just vaporize the ship." Aris stepped into the lab, the sterile air smelling of ozone and desperation. The Veln think in straight lines. Elara, cause and effect, neat and tidy. They see chaos as weakness. What if we show them chaos isn't weakness? What if we show them it's adaptable, unpredictable? What if we weaponize the one thing their rigid minds can't comprehend? He gestured at the flickering display. Time, not just as a river but as a weapon they can't parry because they don't even see the blade. Elara stared at him, a spark igniting in her exhausted eyes. "You mean tactical temporal displacement? Creating pockets where their sensors lie, where their weapons fire before they pull the trigger, where their ships phase out of sync?" "Precisely," Aris said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Make their perfect order stutter, make their certainty Doubt. They fear chaos. Elara, let's give them a chaos they can't calculate. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the weight of command and shared loss heavy in the gesture. Find a way. Before they find us. Weeks bled into months. The ragged fleet, the resolute, the battered dauntless, the barely space-worthy vigilant, limped through the Kuiper Belt, scavenging ice for water, cannibalizing wrecks for parts, living on recycled air and dwindling hope. Morale was a frayed rope, whispers of surrender, of seeking Velv mercy, a concept most knew was an oxymoron, grew louder in the mess halls. Aris walked the decks, his presence a silent anchor, his eyes missing nothing. He saw the hollow cheeks, the haunted stares, the way hands trembled not just from cold but from the constant gnawing terror of the inevitable. Elara worked obsessively. Failures piled up. A test that aged a section of bulkhead centuries in seconds. Another that caused a crewman to experience 10 minutes of subjective time in a single heartbeat, leaving him catatonic. Each setback was a fresh wound. But she refused to yield. She saw the faces of her colleagues lost on Mars, on Luna, on the orbital habitats, faces that fueled her relentless drive. She began to understand the alien tech not as a tool but as a language, the language of time itself, and humanity, born of a world where seasons changed violently, where predators lurked in the dark, where survival demanded constant rapid adaptation. Humanity spoke chaos fluently. Maybe they could learn to speak time. Then the sensors screamed. Multiple contacts. Emerging from hyperspace. Kalen's voice cracked over the comms, raw with panic. Veln dreadnoughts. 4 of them. And smaller vessels. Silent reapers. On the main display, the cold geometric shapes of Veln warships materialized from the quantum foam, blotting out the distant stars. They moved with terrifying synchronized grace, forming a perfect pincer formation around the human fleet's hiding place in the Oort cloud debris field. No hails, no demands. Just the silent, implacable advance of annihilation. Aris stood tall on the bridge, the weight of command settling onto his shoulders like armor. Battle stations. All hands brace for impact. Elara, now or never. In her lab, Elara's fingers flew over the console, sweat beading on her forehead. The temporal matrix glowed with an unstable, sickly green light. Equations scrolled too fast to read. I can't guarantee stability. Aris, it might tear the ship apart. Do it! Aris roared, his voice cutting through the rising klaxons. Give them chaos. Elara slammed her palm onto the activation rune. For a fraction of a nanosecond, nothing happened. Then the Resolute seemed to shimmer. Not visually, but sensorially. The Veln targeting locks flickered and died. The lead dreadnought's plasma cannons, primed to fire, suddenly discharged into empty space where the Resolute had been a microsecond before. Confusion rippled through the Veln fleet. Their perfect formations stuttered. On the harmonious edict, Verlac's multifaceted eyes narrowed. Anomaly detected. Temporal distortion field. Origin. Human vessel Resolute. Impossible. Their technology is primitive. His voice held the first hint of something unfamiliar, dissonance. Captain Thorne stared at his console, data streams showing impossible temporal fluctuations. High strategos. They are manipulating local chronoton fields. It's like they're dancing through time. Impossible, Verlac hissed, mandibles clacking furiously. Such technology is forbidden. Unstable. They risk unraveling space-time itself. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The human ship was phasing, skipping, appearing and disappearing in microloops, evading fire that should have vaporized it instantly. It was illogical. It was chaotic. It was working. Aris watched the Veln ships hesitate, their flawless coordination disrupted. A fierce, desperate hope surged in his chest. Evasive pattern delta. Helm, punch it. Get us clear of the debris field. The Resolute surged forward, weaving through the ice chunks, its engines screaming. The temporal field flickered wildly, causing sections of the hull to momentarily appear aged and rusted, then pristine again. Alarms blared inside the ship, structural integrity failing, power fluctuations. Elara was shouting into the comms, her voice strained. Field collapsing. I can't hold it. Brace for temporal shear. The Veln recovered with terrifying speed. 2 dreadnoughts peeled off, unleashing a barrage of chronoton disruptor pulses. Weapons designed to stabilize time, to crush temporal anomalies. They slammed into the Resolute's flickering shield. The effect was catastrophic. The temporal field didn't just collapse, it imploded. A wave of distorted time washed over the Resolute, lights flickered madly. Crew members screamed as they experienced flashes of past and future. A childhood memory, a vision of death, the taste of Earth's air, the cold kiss of vacuum. The ship groaned, metal screaming as if aged centuries in an instant. On the bridge, Aris was thrown against the railing. He saw Kalen age decades in a heartbeat, his skin wrinkling, hair whitening, before snapping back to youth, gasping. He saw the holodisplay flicker with images of Earth before the bombardment, green, blue, alive, then back to the charred ruin. The disorientation was absolute, nauseating. Then silence. The alarms died. The flickering stopped. The Resolute hung dead in space, power failing, hull breached in a dozen places, drifting helplessly. On the harmonious edict, Vrolak watched the human ship go dark. The dissonance in his mind warred with cold satisfaction. Temporal anomaly neutralized. Target crippled. Prepare boarding parties. Capture the vessel. Secure the temporal technology. And his voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Eliminate all organic lifeforms. This chaotic variable ends now. As Veln salt shuttles detached from the dreadnoughts. Sleek and predatory, Aris struggled to his feet on the darkening bridge. Smoke stung his eyes. The air grew thin. He looked at the viewscreen, at the approaching Veln ships, their weapons glowing ominously. He thought of Elara, probably unconscious in her lab. He thought of the crew, fighting for breath in the dying ship. He thought of Earth, ash on the wind. They had gambled everything on time, and lost. The Veln shuttles closed in, weapons charging. The Resolute was a tomb waiting to be sealed. Darkness, cold, the acrid tang of burnt wiring and spilled coolant. Aris Thorne floated in the zero-G gloom of the Resolute's bridge, tethered to his command chair by a safety line. His head throbbed, a legacy of the temporal implosion. Around him, the groans of the dying ship were punctuated by the ragged breathing of his crew. Emergency lights cast long skeletal shadows. Power was down to auxiliary reserves, barely enough for life support in the command section. The Veln boarding parties would be cutting through the outer hull any minute. Kalen, Aris rasped, his throat raw. A weak cough came from the navigation station. Air, Captain. Barely. The young lieutenant's voice was thin, strained. Sensors. Offline. Comms. Dead. Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7. Atmosphere. Venting. He paused, the unspoken truth hanging heavier than the vacuum outside. They're coming. Aris closed his eyes. Not in defeat but in calculation. Running was impossible. Fighting was suicide. Surrender was death. The temporal gambit had failed spectacularly, leaving them crippled and exposed. Yet the Veln wanted the technology. They wouldn't just blow them apart. They'd board, they'd search, they'd take, and in that taking, perhaps, an opening. Seal all internal bulkheads, Aris ordered, his voice gaining strength. Rig the main reactor for a controlled overload. Set the timer for 10 minutes after their first shuttle docks. He saw the horrified understanding dawn on Kalen's face. We won't give them the ship, Lieutenant, or the tech, and we won't be prisoners. Before Kalen could respond, a new voice crackled weakly over the internal comms, laced with static and pain. Aris, don't be a fool. Elara Vance. Her lab was on deck 4, near a major breach. The temporal matrix, it's not destroyed, it's changed. Aris's heart hammered against his ribs. Elara, talk to me. The implosion. It didn't break it, she gasped, each word an effort. It fused it, with the ship's core systems, with us. The field generator, It's drawing power from the bioelectrical signatures of the crew, from our lives. A cough, wet and painful. It's unstable, dangerously so, but it's also responsive, more than before, like it's learning. Learning? Aris frowned. Learning what? Learning chaos, Elara whispered, a note of awe cutting through her pain, our fear, our hope, our rage. It's feeding the field, making it adaptive, unpredictable, like us. She took a shuddering breath. I think I can trigger it again. Not a shield. Something else. A pulse, but it'll drain everything. Life support. Reactor. Us. It might buy you seconds. Maybe minutes. Elara! No! Kalen cried out. You'll kill yourself. Already dying, Kalen, she said, her voice suddenly calm. Resolute. Better to die buying Aris a chance than waiting for the Veln to peel the skin from my bones. Her voice hardened. Aris, when I trigger it, you run. Don't look back. Find the others. Find a way. Remember Earth. The comms went dead. Aris stared at the blank screen where her voice had been. Grief, sharp and fresh, warred with a cold, hard fury. Elara was sacrificing herself, again, for them, for the idea of humanity. He wouldn't waste it. Kalen, Aris said, his voice low and dangerous. Scrap the reactor overload. New plan. When Elara triggers the pulse, we use the confusion. We hit the emergency escape pods on deck 2. All of them. Scatter like chaff. Make them hunt us through the debris field. And Kalen, sir, set the Resolute's last act. Program the main computer. When the Veln board, flood the primary data core with a recursive virus. Corrupt everything. Scramble the temporal schematics beyond recovery. Let them find only gibberish and ghosts. A grim smile touched Kalen's lips.
Aye, Captain.
Ghosts, they'll understand. Outside, the telltale screech of Veln cutting torches began on the primary airlock. Metal screamed as it was sliced apart. The boarding had begun. On the harmonious edict, Galactic monitored the boarding operation with cold satisfaction. The human vessel was dark, life signs faint and scattered. The chaotic variable was finally being contained. Seb Strategos Thorne stood beside him, his posture rigid, but his neural sensors detected the subtle tremor in his subordinates' biorhythms. Dissonance. Again. Report, Vadlak commanded. The boarding teams report minimal resistance. High Strategos. Thorne relayed, his voice carefully neutral. The humans appear incapacitated. Organic life signs are weak, fading. They are securing the bridge and engineering sections. The temporal technology core is located in Lab 4. Teams are en route. Good, Verlek rumbled. Secure the core. Analyze its principles. This chaotic temporal manipulation, it is an abomination against harmony. Yet its potential for enforcing order is significant. Imagine stabilizing rebellious systems, freezing dissent before it begins. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The humans were too primitive to wield it wisely. We shall correct that. Thorne remained silent, but his mind churned. He had reviewed the fragmented sensor logs from the temporal implosion. He'd seen the impossible fluctuations, the way the human ship seemed to breathe time, and he'd seen the final desperate biosignatures spike with something, not just fear, purpose, a unity in the face of annihilation that felt alien to the rigid hierarchy of the ascendancy. It unsettled him. Harmony was order, yes, but was it a lie? Suddenly, alarms blared across the Edict's bridge. Not from the Resolute, but from the Veln boarding shuttles docked with it. High Strategos. Catastrophic energy surge from the human vessel. Temporal signature spiking off the scale. It's emanating from the organic lifeforms themselves. Verlak whirled, his multifaceted eyes wide with genuine shock. A rare breach in his composure. Impossible. Organic matter cannot generate coherent temporal fields. On the holo display, the dark hulk of the Resolute flared with an eerie greenish light. Not an explosion, but a pulse. A wave of distorted time radiated outwards. The Veln boarding shuttles attached to its hull flickered violently, their systems overloading. Inside the Resolute, the Veln assault teams froze mid-stride, caught in microloops of time, reliving the same second over and over, their weapons firing uselessly into the same patch of bulkhead. Confusion and panic, emotions the Veln rarely experienced, erupted on their comms channels, a chaotic babble of dissonant frequencies. "Sever the shuttles, now!" Vilak roared, his voice cracking with uncharacteristic urgency. "Full retreat. Disengage." But it was too late for the boarding teams. The pulse intensified. The Resolute itself began to unfold. Sections of the hull aged millennia in seconds, crumbling to dust, while others seemed to revert to raw, unformed metal. The ship wasn't just dying, it was unraveling across time. And then tiny sparks erupted from its flanks. Escape pods. Dozens of them, firing erratically into the debris field, vanishing into the icy darkness before the Veln could lock on. Verizlak watched the Resolute collapse in on itself, consumed by its own chaotic temporal death throes. The escape pods were gone. The temporal core was likely destroyed in the maelstrom, and the boarding teams lost to temporal dissonance. A cold fury, colder than the void, settled over him. This wasn't just resistance. This was sacrifice, a weaponized suicide that defied all logic, all prediction. The chaotic variable wasn't just resilient, it was insidious. It infected even death with unpredictability. Substratics, Katharn, Verleg's voice was dangerously quiet. Track those escape pods, every single one. Scour the Oort cloud. Leave no fragment of human biomass unaccounted for. This ends. Now, Katharn bowed, the dissonance within him now a roaring storm. He saw not just a threat to be eliminated, but a terrifying, beautiful defiance he couldn't comprehend, and he feared deeply what the High Stratigo's cold fury would unleash next. Aris Thorne slammed the hatch of Escape Pod 7 shut, the magnetic seals hissing shut just as the Resolute's final silent scream echoed through the comms. A burst of static that felt like Elara's last breath. The pod jolted violently as its thrusters fired, hurling it away from the dying ship and the Veln dreadnoughts. Inside it was cramped, cold, and smelled of fierce sweat and recycled air. Kalen was beside him, pale but alert, monitoring the pod's rudimentary sensors. Two other crew members, engineers from Deck 5, huddled in the rear, shivering. Pods 3, 8, and 12 confirmed launched. Kalen reported, his voice tight. No signals from the others. Villager scrambling. They're everywhere. Aris peered through the small viewport. The debris field was a chaotic maze of ice and rock, lit by the distant, cold glare of the Veln searchlights. Dreadnoughts moved like patient spiders, their sensor beams sweeping the darkness. Escape pods were fragile, slow, and bright on sensors. They wouldn't last long. "Set course for the largest ice dwarf, Kalen," Aris ordered. "Bury us deep. Go dark. Total power down except life support minimum." He looked at the engineers. "Conserve oxygen. Stay quiet. They'll be listening for heartbeats." Days bled into a tense, airless vigil. They drifted, hidden within a cavern in the ice dwarf, listening to the distant hum of Veln patrols. Rations dwindled. Hope dwindled faster. They heard fragmented, panicked comms from other pods. Brief cries cut short by weapon fire or sensor sweeps. Humanity was being hunted to extinction, one fragile pod at a time. Then a miracle. Or a trap. A signal. Faint, but clear, pulsed on a frequency Aris hadn't heard in months. The old pre-war civilian band. It was a simple repeating sequence. 3 long, 2 short. 3 long, 2 short. The old Morse code for Seshawat. But the pattern? It was the call sign of the UNS Persephone, a deep-range science vessel presumed lost near the Galactic Rim years ago. Could it be? Kalen whispered, hope warring with suspicion. "Only one way to find out," Aris said, his voice grim. "But we go in blind. Assume it's a Veln lure until proven otherwise. Prepare the pod's last charge. If it's a trap, we take as many of them with us as we can." They navigated the treacherous ice fields towards the signal source. A derelict-looking freighter hulk half buried in an asteroid. It looked dead, abandoned. No power signatures, no movement. Aris's gut screamed trap. But the signal persisted. 3 long, 2 short. As their pod docked with the freighter's airlock, the hatch cycled open with a groan of ancient machinery. Inside, the corridor was dark, dusty, lit only by their helmet lamps. The air was stale, cold, and then figures emerged from the shadows. Not Veln. Humans, gaunt, scarred, wearing patched survival suits. But undeniably human. Their leader stepped forward, a woman with eyes like flint and a network of scars across her face that spoke of battles fought and survived in the dark. "Captain Thorne," she said, her voice rough but steady. "Took you long enough." "Name's Rourke. We've been waiting." She gestured behind her. "Welcome to the last stand. We've got maybe 200 souls left. Scavengers, miners, soldiers. The dregs the Veln missed. And we've got something you need." She led them deeper into the hulk, past makeshift barracks and workshops humming with jury-rigged tech to a central chamber. In the center, mounted on a reinforced frame, pulsed a device that made Aris's breath catch. It was a temporal matrix, cruder than Elara's, scarred and patched, but unmistakably the same alien technology. And it was active, humming with a low green energy. "We found it," Rourke said, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Buried in the wreck of a Veln scout ship that got too close to a neutron star. They were studying it, scared of it. We weren't." She placed a hand on the humming device. "We've been learning. Like Elara Vance started to. We've been learning to ride the chaos. To make time our weapon." She looked Aris dead in the eye. "The Velns think they've won. They think we're scattered rats. They don't know we've been building a storm, and Captain, we're going to make them drown in it. On Velnara Prime, the heart of the harmonious ascendancy, the air itself felt ordered. Crystalline spires pierced a sky of perfect unblemished blue. Gravity was precisely calibrated. Sound was dampened to a soothing hum. It was a world without surprise, without accident. High Strategos Vorhlok stood before the Grand Conclave, the ruling council of the Ascendancy. His report on the Solon 3 operation and the subsequent anomaly had caused ripples in the placid pool of Veln society. "The chaotic variable persists," Conclave, Relax stated, his voice resonating in the vast geometric chamber. Holographic displays showed the scattered escape pod signatures, the derelict freighter hulk. Their resilience is pathological. They weaponize their own mortality, their own chaos. They have acquired additional temporal technology. They are no longer merely fleeing. They are organizing. A conclave elder, her carapace polished to a mirror sheen, spoke, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. "This is unacceptable, Vig. Your initial sterilization was deemed sufficient. This persistence reflects poorly on your strategic acumen. The Ascendancy tolerates no loose ends, no chaotic echoes." Warlock's mandibles tightened. "The humans are an unprecedented variable, Elder. Their capacity for illogical sacrifice, for weaponizing concepts we deemed unstable, it defies standard predictive models." "Then adapt your models," another elder snapped, his voice sharp, "or remove the variable permanently. Deploy the Chronos Lances, purge the entire Oort Cloud sector. Sterilize it down to the quantum level. Let there be nothing left for their chaos to cling to." Verlac hesitated. The Chronos Lances were the Ascendancy's ultimate weapon. Not kinetic, not energy-based, but temporal. They didn't destroy matter. They unmade it from the timeline, erasing targets from past, present, and future simultaneously. Using them on a sector was extreme. It risked temporal backlash, unpredictable ripples through causality. It was the weapon of last resort, reserved for existential threats to harmony itself. Was a scattered remnant of humans truly that? Catharn, standing silently at the rear of the chamber, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the climate control. He had studied the Chronos Lance protocols. The collateral damage, the potential for erasing entire star systems from history by accident. It was horrifying, and yet the Conclave's logic was impeccable. Chaos must be eradicated, permanently. Conclave, Rulak finally intoned, the weight of the decision settling on him like a physical burden. Authorization for Kronos Lance deployment is granted. Target sector, Sol Ort Cloud. Execute at dawn cycle. As the conclave dispersed, Catharn remained, staring at the holographic star map showing the doomed sector. He thought of the human signal, the desperate SOS. He thought of the flint-eyed woman, Rourke, and the defiant glint in Captain Thorne's eyes. He thought of Elara Vance, sacrificing herself not just to escape but to teach time to dance. Was this truly harmony? Or was it just silence? The silence of a dangerous thought, utterly dissonant, took root in Catharn's mind. What if the chaos was necessary? What if the universe needed the unpredictable spark? The thought was heresy. It was death. But as he looked at the cold, perfect lines of Velnara Prime, he felt a profound, aching emptiness. And for the first time, he understood the human concept of soul. He made his decision. Not for humanity. Not even for himself. But for the universe that might be more than just cold, dead order. He slipped away from the conclave chamber, moving with a purpose that felt terrifyingly chaotic. He had to warn them. He had to give the chaotic variable one last, desperate chance. Deep within the last stand, Aris Thorne stood before the humming temporal matrix. Rourke's people had integrated it with scavenged Veln tech and human ingenuity, creating something crude but potent. Elara's notes, recovered from a miraculously intact data chip in her lab before the Resolute died, were their Bible. They'd learned to stabilize the field to draw power not just from life signs but from the ship's engines, from kinetic energy, from the very motion through space. They could create localized time bubbles, slowing enemy fire, speeding up their own maneuvers, even creating brief echoes, ghost images of their ships to confuse sensors. But it was fragile, unpredictable. Riding the chaos, as Rourke said, was like surfing a tsunami. One wrong move, and you were erased. "We've got eyes on the Veln fleet," a young tech reported, her face lit by the glow of her console. "They're massing, bigger than before. And, Captain, their flagship, it's different. It's got these spires, emitting chronoton radiation off the scale." Aris's blood ran cold. He'd seen schematics of those spires in fragmented Veln archives. Elara had decrypted. "Kronos Lances," he breathed. "They're going to erase the whole sector." Rourke slammed her fist on the console. "Then we hit them before they fire. We use the Matrix. We hit them with everything we've got. Chaos, time, and the last ounce of human fury." The plan was audacious, suicidal. They would lure the Veln fleet into a dense asteroid field near a magnetar, a region of extreme gravitational and electromagnetic distortion. There, the temporal matrix, amplified by the natural chaos of the environment, could create a massive, unstable time storm. They'd ride the storm, striking from impossible angles, appearing where they shouldn't be, disappearing before retaliation. It was their only chance. As the ragged human fleet, the last stand hulk, a handful of jury-rigged freighters and a few surviving military cutters prepared to jump, a proximity alert blared. Unidentified vessel, emerging from hyperspace, alone, Vel's signature. Panic erupted. Had they been found? Was it a scout? "Wait!" Kalen yelled, staring at the sensor readout. "It's broadcasting on a tight beam encrypted channel, using Elara Vance's personal cipher." Aris's heart stopped. Elara was dead, but her cipher, only a few knew it. He opened the channel. The voice that came through was strained, desperate, speaking broken, accented standard. "Captain Thorne? This is Substrategos Catharn of the Veln Ascendancy. Do not engage. Kronos Lances are armed, targeting your sector. They will fire at dawn cycle. You have less than 1 standard hour. Flee, or prepare your temporal weapon for a fight you cannot win alone." Silence. Utter, disbelieving silence filled the last stand's command center. A Veln warning them. Betraying his own kind. Rourke stared at Aris, her flinty eyes wide. "Is it a trick?" Aris looked at the sensor display showing the lone Veln scout ship, holding position. Vulnerable. He thought of Catharn's hesitation during the resolute battle, the dissonance he'd sensed. He thought of the sheer suicidal risk the Veln was taking, and he thought of Elara, who believed time could be taught. "No," Aris said, his voice thick with a strange mix of hope and sorrow. "It's not a trick. It's redemption." He keyed the command. "Catharn, we hear you, thank you. But we're not running. Tell me, how do those Chronos lances work? What's their weakness?" Catharn's voice was filled with awe and terror. "They require perfect temporal synchronization across the fleet to fire. A single dissonant chronotine pulse, at the precise moment of firing, could cause a catastrophic feedback loop. It would unravel the lances themselves, but the timing it is impossible. You would need to be inside their formation at the exact nanosecond." Aris looked at the humming temporal matrix, then at Rourke, then at the faces of his crew, scared, determined, alive. He smiled, a fierce, terrible smile. "Impossible is our specialty, Catharn. Hold position, we're coming in hot, and thank you." He turned to his crew. "New plan. We don't just ride the storm, we become the storm. Kalen, plot a course that puts us between the Veln dreadnoughts and their Chronos lances at the predicted firing solution. Rourke, get that matrix ready to deliver one hell of a dissonant pulse. We're going to give the Veln a lesson in chaos they'll never forget if they survive it." As the human fleet powered up, engines screaming defiance into the void, Catharn watched from his scout ship, his biorhythms spiking with fear and something else, hope. He had chosen chaos over harmony, and as the first human ships vanished into hyperspace, heading straight for the heart of the Veln Armada, he knew the universe would never be the same. The chaotic variable had found an ally in the heart of order itself, and the final, terrible dance was about to begin. The magnetar hung in the void like a malevolent god, its intense magnetic field twisting space itself, painting the surrounding nebula in violent streaks of crimson and violet. Asteroids pulled into chaotic orbits, tumbled and collided in silent, spectacular explosions of rock and ice. It was the perfect maelstrom, a natural amplifier for the unnatural storm humanity was about to unleash. Aris Thorne stood on the command deck of the Last Stand, now retrofitted as a command ship, his eyes fixed on the holodisplay. The Veln fleet was a geometric nightmare of perfect formation, dreadnoughts forming a protective sphere around the flagship, the harmonious edict, its Chronos lances glowing with ominous, building power. Dawn's cycle was minutes away. The countdown was a drumbeat in Aris's skull. "Kalen, status on the temporal matrix?" "Charged to maximum, Captain," Kalen replied, his voice tight with concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Rourke's team has it synced to the Magna Pulse frequency. It's unstable, like holding a live supernova in a paper bag. One wrong fluctuation." "We know," Aris cut in, his gaze never leaving the Veln fleet. "Catharn, you still with us?" The Veln scout ship's icon flickered on the display. "Affirmative, Captain Thorne. Veln comms are agitated. They suspect my betrayal. High Strategos Verlac has ordered my immediate destruction. I am buying you time." A pause, filled with static and the distant whine of weapons charging. "Do not waste it." "Understood." Aris, a lump forming in his throat. Sacrifice. It was the currency of this war. All ships, execute plan Ragnarok. Godspeed. The human fleet, a ragged collection of hulks and hope, dropped out of hyperspace not at the edge of the asteroid field, but inside it, right in the path of the tumbling rocks. Chaos erupted instantly. Veln targeting systems, designed for clean void engagements, struggled to lock onto the erratic human signatures weaving through the debris. Plasma bolts sizzled past, vaporizing asteroids instead of hulls. "Now Rourke," Aris roared. Deep within the Last Stand, Rourke slammed her fist onto the activation console. The temporal matrix flared, not with a shield but with a pulse. A wave of distorted time radiated outwards, amplified 1,000-fold by the magnetar's field. The asteroid field shimmered. Time itself seemed to stutter. On the Veln bridges, chaos reigned. Dreadnoughts that were moving forward suddenly found themselves bascored in their formation. Plasma bolts fired a second ago detonated before they were fired, causing catastrophic feedback in weapon systems. Crew members experienced flashes of their own deaths, their births, moments of pure terror or joy ripped from their timelines. The perfect order of the ascendancy shattered like glass. Impossible. Ralak bellowed on the harmonious edict, his multifaceted eyes wide with genuine terror as his ship lurched violently, temporal sensors screaming overload. They are weaponizing the magnetar. They are turning the cosmos against us. He saw the human ships, not just evading, but appearing inside his formation, firing point-blank with salvaged railguns and jury-rigged plasma cannons. A freighter, its hull patched with asteroid metal, materialized through the shield of a dreadnought, its ramming prow tearing into the Veln vessel's bridge before both ships vanished in a fireball of twisted metal and temporal static. Kronos lances, fire, now! Verlac screamed. Desperation overriding protocol. Ignore synchronization. Erase them. The spires on the edict blazed with blinding white light. Chronoton energy. The fabric of time itself began to coalesce, aiming not at individual ships but at the entire sector. The air on the last stand grew thin, cold, as if reality itself was being sucked away. Stars outside the viewport began to flicker, their light dimming as if being erased from history. "They're firing," Kalen yelled, his voice cracking. "Temporal shear in 10 seconds. 5. We can't get close enough for the pulse." Aris saw it. The last stand was still too far. The dissonant pulse wouldn't reach the lances in time. The sector, Earth's memory, humanity's last stand, all would be unmade, erased as if they never existed. Then a new icon flashed on the display. Cawthorn's scout ship. It wasn't fleeing, it was accelerating, not away from the edict but towards it, on a direct collision course with the base of the largest Kronos lance spire. "Cawthorn! No!" Aris shouted into the comm. Cawthorn's voice came through, calm, resolute, filled with a strange peace. "The harmony was a cage, Captain Thorne. Chaos is freedom. Tell your people, tell them Velnara Prime has stars too. Beautiful, chaotic stars." His ship's engines flared to maximum overdrive. For the universe, the small Veln scout ship slammed into the Kronos lance spire at near light speed. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Kronos lance, already charged to maximum, destabilized by the physical impact and the scout ship's own chronoton signature, went critical. Instead of firing a coherent beam of temporal erasure, it exploded in a feedback loop of pure, uncontrolled chronoton energy. A wave of temporal annihilation erupted from the harmonious edict. But it wasn't focused. It was chaotic, wild. It washed over the Veln fleet like a tsunami of unraveling time. Dreadnoughts didn't just explode. They unraveled, one moment solid metal, the next dissolving into clouds of rust that aged millennia in seconds, then collapsing into dust that hadn't existed a moment before. Veln crew members flickered in and out of existence, their lives playing out in reverse, then forward, then sideways, before winking out entirely. The harmonious edict itself began to fracture across time, sections appearing as pristine new constructions, others as ancient, crumbling wrecks, all superimposed in a horrifying, impossible collage. The wave hit the human fleet. The last stand shuddered violently, alarms screamed, lights died, the temporal matrix overloaded, its core melting down in a shower of green sparks. But the human ships, already riding the chaotic wave they'd created, survived. They were battered, breached, systems failing. But they existed. The Velson fleet was being unmade. Aris watched, stunned as the might of the harmonious ascendancy dissolved into temporal static. The Kronos lance explosion had been the ultimate chaotic variable. A Veln weapon turned against its masters by a Veln traitor, amplified by human ingenuity in the raw chaos of the cosmos. It was poetic. It was horrifying. It was victory. "Kalen status?" Aris asked, his voice hoarse. "Veln fleet? Gone," Captain Kalen whispered, tears streaking through the grime on his face. "Completely unraveled. No debris, no signals. just temporal echoes. He looked at Aris, awe and grief warring in his eyes. Captain Aris saved us. Aris nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his own cheek. He looked out at the viewport. The magna still pulsed, the asteroid still tumbled, but the geometric perfection of the Veln fleet was gone, replaced by the beautiful, terrifying chaos of the natural universe, and floating amidst the temporal static, a single intact escape pod tumbled slowly. Cutharn's final act had shielded it at the last moment. They retrieved it. Inside, barely alive, was Cutharn. His carapace was cracked, his biorhythms faint, but he lived. He had chosen chaos, and chaos had spared him. Weeks later, the remnants of humanity gathered not in the ashes of Sol but in the quiet void near a nameless nebula. The last stand was a ghost ship barely holding together, but around it new ships were being built, not from scavenged wrecks but from asteroid ore and Veln tech salvaged from the temporal echoes. Hope, fragile but real, was taking root. Aris Thorne stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Captain, wrapped in a thermal blanket, stood beside him. His movements slow, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight. "They will come again, you know," Cutharn said. His voice still weak but clear. "The conclave. They will see this as a catastrophic failure of harmony. They will double down. They will build more Kronos lances. They will hunt you to the end of time." Aris nodded slowly. "Maybe, but they'll never understand us. They'll never understand that chaos isn't our weakness, Cutharn. It's our strength. It's how we adapt, how we survive, how we live." He gestured to the nebula, swirling with chaotic beauty. "They tried to erase us from time, but time is on our side now, because we learned to dance with it." He turned to Cutharn. "You gave us a future. What will you do with yours?" Cutharn looked at the human ships under construction, at the faces of the survivors, scarred, weary, but alive with a fire the Veln could never comprehend. He thought of the stars over Velinara Prime, seen only through filtered domes, never truly felt. He thought of the chaotic, terrifying, beautiful storm they had unleashed. "I will learn to dance," Cutharn said, a new kind of light in his eyes. "I will learn your chaos, Captain Thorne, and perhaps I will teach you a little harmony. Not the rigid kind, but the harmony of coexistence, of stars that burn differently, yet light the same sky." Aris smiled, a genuine, weary smile. "Welcome aboard, Cutharn. The dance is just beginning." He looked out at the infinite stars, no longer just points of light, but possibilities. The galaxy hadn't feared humanity for their weapons, or their ships, or their deathworld resilience. It had feared them because they dared to touch time itself, not to control it, but to wield its chaos, and in that act, they hadn't just survived. They had become something new, something the rigid architects of order could never predict, never contain, never truly understand. The void still didn't care, but humanity, and now one Veln, cared fiercely. And in the grand, indifferent cosmos, that fierce, chaotic, beautiful caring was everything. The symphony of chaos had found its first defiant note, and the universe, for the first time in eons, leaned in to listen.